G'day, I'm the Thorough Tank, and this is a quick reference guide to the Upper Karazhan Mythic Keystone dungeon. This guide is designed to cover the trash route through the dungeon, including mobs to skip and mobs to pull. It'll cover major mechanics, both boss and trash, that can wipe you, and it'll give you a quick overview of every boss. For those who follow me for a while, this video is recorded a little bit differently. I've done it on my Brewmaster rather than my Demon Hunter. As a result, the key is a little bit lower than the levels you've been seeing. We're only doing a level 12 here, which is about equal to a 16 or a 15 from before patch 7.3. You still will get a plenty good idea enough of what the dungeon is like, and it'll be a chance for you guys to see a little bit of a different class doing the dungeon. On with the show! Coming up first, you want to grab the first ghost through the doorway, along with its friend over on the other side near the stairs. No real reason not to pull them both together. They aren't that dangerous even on a higher key, and it just makes things a little bit more efficient. The ghosts will do two things. Firstly, they'll cast an ability called Soul Leech, which will need to be interrupted. It just does an AoE channel damage to everybody nearby. Doesn't really take too much effort to interrupt it, you've got plenty of time. The other one is a tank damage ability, which is a magic debuff they put on you. This really ticks hard and hurts. Your healer can dispel it, but if they don't know they can, or if they just don't, you will need to make sure you have some cooldowns ready for it. Heading up through here, there'll be another ghost up ahead, which has a fear that needs to be interrupted and doesn't have any of the magic damage debuffs that you need to worry about. So just quickly kill that one, don't let it get its fear off. Head up through here and grab the robot on the left. There's no real reason to grab the one on the left, it's just the one that's closest. And make sure that throughout fighting this guy that you dodge the arcane puddles that spawn on the ground when he uses unstable energy. They're not going to kill you as the tank, but it's still good to dodge them anyway. This next robot, another relatively simple one. This robot is really easy. Just look for when he casts Nullification. It'll put a debuff on a random person. They'll need to go pick up their soul fragment from an area on the ground. In this case, you can see it was me. It's just a purple floating energy beam on the ground that you need to run into. Once you run into it, you get a damage buff, which doubles your damage for a short period of time. You really want to hope that this ends up on a DPS, but you don't really have any control over it, so just deal with whatever happens. Coming through into the next room, you want to pick up the pack that's right in front of you and fight it where it stands. The big guy is the dangerous one in these packs. He's got a big AoE cast, which will do a substantial amount of damage to everybody in the group. The only way to interrupt it is to burn through his absorb shield before you're able to actually interrupt him. Just work your way through these packs one at a time. It's too dangerous to try to double pull unless your group is very confident in their burst DPS and their coordinated interrupts. I almost never do double pulls. Watch out for Curator. When he's patrolling around here, you want to make sure that you're avoiding him as much as possible. If you do accidentally pull him, just taunt him and drag him out of the room through the door you came in, and he'll reset as soon as he gets through the hallway. It can actually be a useful thing to intentionally reset him if he's patrolling in a bad position, and you want to make sure you just have a little bit of extra time to pull the last couple of trash packs. Curator himself is one of the more difficult bosses in this dungeon. You want to be careful to position him correctly throughout the entire fight. There are a few mechanics to watch out for. The one that affects you most is Power Discharge, which puts a patch of lightning underneath everybody in the group. You want to make sure you move the boss so that melee DPS can always hit him and nobody needs to stand. But you're also going to want to be careful about how you move him throughout the fight, because your group is going to, generally speaking, follow your lead, and you can control to a degree where your group stands, which means you can control where the lightning goes. Notice how all the lightning is on the left hand side of the room. By keeping the boss on the left, you're able to encourage your group to move with the boss, which gives you a free path to move back up the right hand side of the room once you run out of room on the left. On high tyrannical keys especially, this is really important because the fight will go for a very long time and you're going to run out of space if you just let people stand willy-nilly. The Volatile Orbs are a mechanic that you need to be aware of, but which don't affect you very much. The orbs will spawn randomly on top of a member of your group and then periodically jump around onto a different member of your group, causing damage when they arrive. They deal a lot of damage as long as they're up. Anytime they're near you, you should contribute to damage on them as much as possible, but if they're not nearby, don't kill yourself trying to get over to them. When he hits 0 energy, he'll go into Evocate phase when he takes double damage. Just do as much damage as you can to him during this phase, maximise the opportunity. Before we move on, I want to cover a difference in strategy that you'll use for this fight if you've got an organised group that will actually listen to you when you tell them where to stand. They want to spread out along the width of the hallway and slowly progress down, rather than going down one side and up the other. It spreads the room out a bit, gives people a bit more room to move and a bit more room to avoid things. It only works if you have a substantial amount of range DPS, because the orbs will spawn a little bit further apart and they'll need to be killed that way. And just generally in speaking, need to be careful that you make sure not to get caught behind patches. But it does make things a lot easier. As you can see here, we're spreading out and filling the whole hallway up, which is going to give us a lot of room to play with as we get further down towards the end of the room. It means much less likelihood of someone getting caught and a much easier fight overall. There is one more method you can use for this fight if you trust your group to move really rapidly and react quickly. What you'll do is have everybody stack really tightly on top of you, and you'll all move as a group every time the power discharge gets dropped. This has the advantage of making every single volatile energy spawn directly on top of you, and it can be the only way to do the fight if you have a group with 2 or 3 melee DPS in it, because you simply won't have the ability to DPS everything down quickly enough. However, it's also a very high risk strategy, because if somebody moves a fraction too early, they'll drop their puddle behind everyone else's and others will run into it as they're trying to move away from their own. If someone moves a fraction too late, they'll get hit by 5 puddles and instantly die. It's a good strategy to know about, but I don't recommend using it in a group that you don't trust. Once you've head through the door out of Curator's room, run straight through, ignore this caster here on the left. You don't need to kill him. If he's in your path, hit him with a stun or a CC or something. It doesn't matter if you get in combat with him, his combat will drop with you as soon as you get down into this area up here. Same thing for this mob in your path here. If you have a CC that you can use like Banish here, just put it on him and run straight past. We actually had a little bit of funny business go on with this guy. We actually somehow managed to aggro him and he ended up in the room with us fighting the next boss. We just kept banishing him until the end and then fought him. So for this next part with this boss, ignore the fact that there's a gigantic demon banished right next to us. Shade of Medivh is another difficult boss. He has 3 abilities that he rotates through and 3 ultimates that he cycles through. Inferno Bolt is a fiery circle that goes around you and explodes for a damage debuff over time. Frostbite does a big initial hit of damage and then leaves the target frozen for a period of time in an ice block. You can only break the person out by hitting them with an Inferno Bolt circle. And the last one is Piercing Missiles, which will always target you and does arcane damage throughout the channel, leaving a debuff on you that increases arcane damage taken if it finishes the cast. Let this go for as long as possible before interrupting it. The time he spends casting this ability is time he spends not casting any others. As mentioned, there are 3 ultimate abilities which he uses roughly every 30 seconds. Help your group kill the bird adds 1 at a time during the Arcane ultimate phase. For the Fire ultimate, you need to ensure that your group stands still for Flame Wreath and that nobody crosses into the circles spawned around the affected players. And for the Frost ultimate, make sure you constantly keep moving so that you don't take any stacks or damage from it. After the long drop, jump off the books and head to the railing on the other side from where you jump down. Make sure you avoid all of the trash here because you don't need to kill any of it. Just keep an eye on it. It does patrol quite quickly, but you should be just fine. As an exception to the aforementioned skipping all of the trash, do pick up this spider near the boss. It'll be a little bit safer. Its patrol path does take it in line with the boss, and it's entirely possible you might pick it up when fighting. It only has 2 abilities. One, it will drop a web on somebody which roots them to the ground, which is very dangerous during the boss encounter and is why you want to make sure you get it beforehand. It also does a leech life ability which needs to be dispelled to avoid the spider self-healing too much. Up next is Mana Devourer. He doesn't have too many mechanics, but he still can be quite difficult. You're going to want to make sure you avoid the arcane bombs. They won't kill you, but they are a pretty significant amount of damage. And when he throws out the orbs, you're going to want to use defensive cooldowns to help you soak them. Try to avoid picking up more than 3 or 4 at a time, and as soon as you pick them up, run straight to a magic zone and use that to drop your stacks. Classes with immunities are extremely helpful here. Paladins with Divine Shield, Rogues with Cloak of Shadow, Mages with Ice Block, all that sort of thing is very, very helpful in being able to soak up a lot of these orbs. But as the tank, you always should try to contribute because you can take quite a few stacks. That's all there is to Mana Devourer. Like I mentioned, not a particularly complicated boss, but he can be quite difficult for some groups, especially if you don't have any immunities. Find a few groups of the mana worms once you're back up to normal size. I usually like to tank 2 or 3 groups at a time depending on the affix combos. While you're fighting these, you're going to want to watch out for the little Arcane Orbs that they fling out. These look similar to the ones from the boss that you just fought, but they work a bit differently. They don't do any damage to you when you pick them up, but they do give you a 10% damage and healing buff for 10 seconds for every one you pick up, and they stack. And if they reach the mobs will explode for arcane AoE damage. If you're tanking a lot of these, they can get in, so do your part in picking them up. The damage and healing buff certainly doesn't hurt. Head through the tunnel, and once you're out on this bridge section here, there are a few things you're going to want to watch out for. First of all, the bats that are flying up above will try to pelt you with AoE. It's represented by the green swirls on the ground. Just make sure you're not standing in it. Then there's two different kinds of mobs. One is a melee mob and the other is a caster. The melee mob will cast Heavy Swing, which leaves a vacuum green patch on the ground, which will just keep you trapped in the center of it. Doesn't do any damage, so don't worry about standing in it. The second ability is Mighty Swing, which is a knockback. Be careful you don't get knocked off the platform like I just did there. I was lucky and able to save myself with Transcendence, but not every tank class can do that. The caster only has one ability you need to watch out for, these little green orbs that he spawns. You just need to stand in them and soak them so that they don't explode. They're just bombs. They do minor damage while you're standing in them, but it's better that you do it than anybody else. If there are two and they're separated, you will need someone's help. You won't just be able to do it yourself. Once they're down, head up into the chess room. There really is not much you have to worry about here. Stay within range of the king if you need to, so that he only melees you and doesn't melee anyone else. He'll attack you if you've got aggro on him and you're the closest, but even if you've got aggro, if you're not within range, he'll attack anybody else who is. Apart from that, just dodge all the stuff that spawns on the ground. None of it really has anything special to it, you just have to step out of it as it spawns. The last boss, Vizadoon, can be pretty unforgiving if people in your group don't know what to do, but if you do everything right, he's actually not that difficult. The fight is split into three phases. The first phase is here on the ground, and the second two are on two Legion spaceships. The mechanics are nearly identical through all the phases, with just a few small differences. Through all the phases, you're going to want to dodge the disintegrate beam, as it'll knock you back and do a chunk of damage. You want to avoid the bombardment patches on the ground, interrupt the burning blast, or have your healer dispel it if it gets through. Stand still when Chaotic Shadows is about to expire so that you don't run into your own orbs, and make sure you dodge everyone else's. The laser in the first phase can target you. If it does, just stand still and use a cooldown so that you don't have to kite it all over the place. It makes things a lot more difficult for your melee DPS and takes up a lot of room on the platform. It doesn't do that much damage to you and you should be fine. Step into the portals at the end of every phase to fly from ship to ship. On the first ship, navigate the lightning generators between each cast of his I-beam until you make your way to the boss. The second ship, snag all of the Fel Guards and drag them to the boss. And when you're on the second ship and you get to the boss, don't interrupt his long cast until it's nearly done. He does nothing during this ability, and as long as you don't let it go off, it's just free damage on the boss. And that's all there is to the last boss. It's a pretty messy fight, particularly in phase 3 when 3 chaotic shadows are going off. It's very easy to lose people. You can see here we ended up struggling to the end, but we got there in the end, and so will you. That brings us to the end of Upper Karazhan. I hope this has given you the confidence to go out and tank this for a group of strangers. If you liked the video, or if you think I missed something, please do leave a comment and let me know. Thank you very much.